Hey everybody, it's your boy Captain Hunter coming at you again. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I really appreciate it. I wanted to make this video because I was watching a YouTube reaction with a couple of other police officers to this Massey shooting and the controversy that continues to erupt over what occurred with that situation. I gotta move some stuff around here. Hold on. All right, so I was watching some other officers' response. And it doesn't seem to be. This may be a more difficult case to get a conviction on than I had initially thought. The officers are definitely always going to have different interactions or opinions, but I thought this one would be a little better, but apparently not. So I was watching. I think it was called The Bullpen with Dr. Ritchie, The Bullpen with Dr. Ritchie. And so in that particular episode, they had Brandon Tatum and another retired Baltimore police officer. I'll put the screenshot up here. I don't have it pulled up right now. So these officers, Brandon Tatum is still standing by that he thought that the actions at the particular time were in line with the law. He's obviously in disagreement with the district or county prosecutor, whatever they're called out there in Illinois, county prosecutor, state's prosecutor, whatever. He's at odds with the Dr. Ritchie, who is in law school or just graduated from law school. I'm not sure. The other officer, myself, and countless other officers. I don't think that any police union has backed this particular officer. I mean, there's always going to be people on other sides, but it's really disappointing. I mean, listen, there were people who were supporting, George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, that officer. So. It's always going to be something. But I wanted to do this because I wanted to talk about, how we can change the police culture in the environment and all that. And I think that would be a great change. And there's been calls for this particular officer this county sheriff to resign. And I think that he should resign. We just saw a major debacle with the assassination attempt on former President Trump, and the backlash that people are calling for his resignation. I think that this should be the same thing. President Trump is obviously, a grand political figure, and this woman, her life is valuable as well. And she was, in my estimation, suffering from a mental crisis at the time, and I think that it's going to come out, or has already come out in different news articles, that she was there. She had called the police either the night before. So there was definitely a history of her dealing with mental illness. So we're going to watch a couple of videos here. And the first one we're going to watch is just, to my estimation, a reason why this man should step down. As I talked about before, Secret Service head chief Cheadle had to resign because of calls for a resignation. I think that the calls should be just as strong for this sheriff, because of his response to the questions that were asked. And then we're going to watch a little bit more, and then I'm going to give my recommendations here. So
an Illinois sheriff tells CBS
I always forget to put my headphones on.
News, the former deputy who shot and killed Massey inside her home had not only been trained but retrained to avoid that type of unwarranted lethal force. In an interview with CBS's Roxana Saberi, the sheriff gave us a harsh assessment of the former deputy charged with Massey's murder.
This was a rogue individual that acted outside the scope of his authority. He's been arrested, and he will pay the price.
Sangamon County Sheriff Jack Campbell says when he hired Deputy Sean Grayson in May of last year, he received twice as much training as other new deputies.
He had all the training he needed, he just didn't use it.
So how did he slip through the cracks like that?
I don't know.
Now Grayson is...
That's an unacceptable answer. I don't know if that was cut. They being the news agencies have a tendency to cut. He might have elaborated more. So I'm going to give him the benefit of a doubt that he actually said a little bit more than I just don't know. But if that was the full extent of his answer, then he should be fired or resigned.
Is being held in a local jail after being charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder for killing Massey on July 6th. CBS News has learned that Grayson had a history of disciplinary issues at other law enforcement agencies, including allegations he put false information in his police reports. And once disobeyed a command to end a high-speed chase.
Are you disappointed that you didn't receive that?
I would have rather had it, yes.
Would it have changed your decision to hire?
I can't speculate.
Grayson also
I would have had it, but I can't speculate as to if I had all this information, it would have affected my decision to hire. These are terrible answers. They're terrible answers.
pleaded guilty twice to driving under the influence of alcohol in 2015 and 16.
Did that raise any red flags?
No, it's not a red flag.
One, DUI, people might think, okay, a mistake. But two, does he have a drinking problem? That didn't raise any concerns for you?
There was nothing in his past at all that would decertify him as an officer in Illinois.
In a community meeting on Monday, residents called for the sheriff to resign.
Coming out here and saying you won't resign before you heard from anybody in the community is not acting in good faith.
What steps can you take to rebuild trust in you and your office?
I was elected to run the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office overwhelmingly twice. And that responsibility means in good times and in bad.
What could you and your office have done better?
I don't think there's much we could have done better.
Grayson has been fired.
I truly hope, that was not that was not the entirety and the scope of his questions. I hope that this was clipped, edited, to do whatever. I really hope that. And if it was, I hope that he steps up, speaks up, gets a lawyer or whatever, because they took my words out of context. You know, that was just bad. That was a bad interview, if that was the full extent to what that was. So we're going to get into another video here, and this, I only played a couple minutes of this. We're not going to watch the full 16 minutes, but I stopped at a minute 30 and said, hey, let me get this on tape here. So let's rewind it here, and this is another news network, WCIA, and so we'll play from here. Here we go.
Earlier this week, you stood in front of a crowd at the listening session. You said, you will not step down, you will not resign. Since then, we heard from the community at that listening session, multiple people calling on you to step down, and we've also heard 2 county board members now officially publicly call for your resignation. Do you stand by your statements from Monday night?
Absolutely. So when it comes to the county board members, those are individuals I've worked with very closely throughout my career, and I believe that's just partisan politics.
You know, some things should not be said out loud, and here he is saying it. So this is not going to make good for his working with them going forward. It's not going to work well for that. Talking about party politics, city politics. That's not going to work well for him saying that.
The reaction Monday night was certainly from a community that's hurting, and I understand that. And I was elected to lead this office through good times and bad, and this is certainly a bad time. And it would be dereliction of my duties to abandon the sheriff's office right now when they need me more than ever, so I will not resign.
What about the activists, the community members, even the members of sonyamassey's family that have called and said that the steps that were taken to put Sean Grayson in that position were part of the problem and should be addressed as a part of this, meaning you at the head of the department?
Well, nothing in his background, nothing in any of his testing, evaluations, anything at all would have led us to believe that he would snap the way he did. He acted outside the scope of his authority, our policies and procedures, and the law. And I think it's impossible to predict human behavior, but there is absolutely nothing in his background that would decertify him from working in law enforcement. The state of Illinois State Training and Standards Board had certified him 6 times.
So his verbiage here is very important. Because he's saying, essentially what he's saying is he met all the bare minimums, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. But this is the bare minimum, right? Nothing in it he did that would certify him. In other words, this man was not the cream of the crop, but there is a baseline, and he was meeting that baseline. So if you're meeting the baseline, if you get an employee who meets the baseline, or you get one who exceeds expectations, anyone who has ever filled out an evaluation or read your evaluation, right, you get meets expectations or exceeds expectations. So in any other job, right, if you got somebody who's going to exceed expectations or going to meet them, you're going to hire the one who exceeds those expectations. Now, is this? I'll talk about this in a little bit, but this is important. This is an important distinction that is being made here.
Over and over and over again to continue working in law enforcement. There was nothing that we could have predicted, and we are baffled and stunned and horrified by what he did. and this is on him and him alone.
You mentioned he had nothing in his background for that record. In the past few weeks, we've received records from prior law enforcement jobs, mostly in Logan County, the job he had immediately before this one. His record, through a FOIA request that was received in 5 days, and we got the information back. There were audio recordings of his superior officers questioning him towards the end of his time there at Logan County, why he was still even employed there. And then shortly after, he gets hired at Sangamon County. And just from the perspective of Sangamon County being, the largest county in central Illinois and north of the Metro East, and the standard that would be expected at a sheriff's department of this size, does that show that you did enough due diligence in his hiring, that those records were, while they might not have been in his initial application, were accessible through relatively convenient means?
We don't FOIA any agency at all. We rely on professional courtesy, that when we call and we ask questions about a potential applicant, that they're truthful with us and they give us any documents that would help us decide whether or not they should be employed here or not. Unfortunately, we did not receive those from Logan County.
Are you going to FOIA now?
Well, I think that all the information is out there, but certainly we're going to take a deeper dive into what else could be. But it's an ongoing process.
I guess I'll rephrase that question. Are you going to be making the hiring process and the vetting process for your officers more in-depth?
It has been discussed because if we can't rely on another agency to give us all the information and we have to file a FOIA request, maybe that's the easiest thing for everybody. And if everybody in the state does the same thing, then nobody would be offended by it. But I will work with whether it's the State Training and Standards Board, the Illinois Sheriff's Association, to figure out maybe there's a better way that we can do this, and maybe
his answer again. he's pretty good at speaking about this, right? So he's kind of throwing the other agencies under the bus. So what he's saying is that, right? So we all need to get on the same page here, right? So I can't be the only one FOIA-ing, Freedom of Information acting. I can't be the only department that's doing that. Everybody has to do it. And so maybe this ought to just be part of the process. And shame on the other agency. There's a lot, these agencies want to keep their hands clean. They don't want to be held liable for anything, right? Because I wonder, legally speaking, if this county has any type of repercussions, right? You didn't tell us all this, right? We call you up, and I've had to do this, right? We call other agencies up, and they ask for their records, and if you don't put that in their records, how are they supposed to know and supposed to respond? So yeah, so I would agree that there needs to be some type of oversight that needs to come down from the state, from different counties and different police departments, and say, here, listen, here's how we are going to hire. We're going to ask for any and every single piece of information, and if you hold back, maybe there ought to be some type of penalty. But these departments, right? This department, the Sangamon County had every right to know that this man had disobeyed a direct order to stop a pursuit, that he was chewed out by a supervisor, and that's why he was employed there, right? All that is relevant. All that is relevant. And this may be a bigger problem than just the Sangamon County. This may be on Logan County as well. Again, I'm not a lawyer, knowing all about the legal ins and outs, but I'm looking at that, right? If I'm a lawyer, and depending on the laws and the ability to sue and all that, again, I don't know, but I would be looking at that, right? How come a news agency can get information that a hiring agency can't? If they would have known that, he said in a previous video, he can't speculate as to whether he would hire, but that's an issue. That is a serious issue, and it's really going to depend on the states and all that. So, in the state that I live in, if you are resigned while you are under investigation, you can't jump to another department within that state. So, that's a big problem. That's a big problem.
FOIA is the right way to do it, so it's something that we'll have to take a look at.
There's been calls for that deeper hiring process, reform to that hiring process. At this point, are you on board with those discussions to that point where this isn't beyond just the regular actions of a sheriff's department, but the regulation at a higher level?
I think it's important that we know the entire background of an individual in any line of work, especially in law enforcement, though, and I will work with these agencies and figure out what is the best process moving forward to make sure we get all this information.
The process of hiring him, you released his personnel record last night, and in that you also included a statement where you talked about how much credence you put towards the statements, the references given in these documents. One of the references on his application was from a longtime Sheriff's Deputy, Scott Butterfield, here at the department. He was here for over 20 years. He was set to become Grayson's father-in-law in October. Did you put too much credence in that specific reference?
Not too much credence. We look at all the references.
Good old boys club, right? That's what I talked about in other videos. Cousin of a cousin, friend of a friend, son-in-laws, brother-in-laws, all this kind of stuff, right? You're just going around hiring your people.
And certainly I've been here my entire life. I've been in law enforcement over 30 years. I get this a lot where I know somebody, and maybe an applicant purposely puts somebody down that they know is connected to the sheriff's office because references are there to try to help out the individual. So, but we vet all of them. We call all the references, and certainly having worked with Scott for all those years, I did believe in that like I would anybody that I knew. For any position, a records clerk, I would do the same thing. I do give some weight to that. So, but it's the same process for everybody, and it gave him no edge up. When I know somebody like that, if they call me about it, I'll say we'll give them an interview, but it will be no different from that person than somebody else.
But does that, you say it gives no edge, but does it go a ways in maybe years before he started working here? He also had the 2 DUIs. Some of his training scores in that personnel file you released last night, his cognitive exam said that he scored low in that particular one. He needs.
This last one here, discharge from Army for serious offense, and it's my understanding that the Army did not release what that offense was. The 6 departments, that's becoming more common because people are going to jump around, particularly if they can take their 401ks with them. They're going to jump around for better opportunities, better working circumstances, better working environment, and of course money, benefits. So that's becoming more common. History of disobeying orders at Logan County. Right. So I would try to get FOI all these different departments. Low in the cognitive test. I mean, as long as it's passing, a discharge from Army for serious offense. So that last one is bothersome to me.
Time to make certain decisions. It's been pointed out by more than just me that there were some flags popping up in this. Does a reference like that, it may not give an edge, but does it set aside those kinds of other issues that may pop up in an application?
No.
It doesn't at all with it. When you say yourself that you put more credence in those.
It's under yes, it means something, but it doesn't give them an edge as far as it may give me confidence. And I don't know if that's the same as edge to you, but we look at everybody the same way.
So here's what I think that the interviewer is asking. If you put this on a point scale, right? Somebody's got they score the same in everything else, right? Their backgrounds are pretty much the same. Their testing scores, their written scores, their verbal scores, cognitive scores, psychological tests, examinations, their physical tests, and does the references, because a future father-in-law, does that present better than if I took the test and I'm just some outsider from Indiana, another state, and I come here, which one are you going to hire? That's what the questioner is asking. I think that's what he's asking. And I gotta believe that of course it does. That's why I think that the interviewer is pressing him on this. Of course it does. And I think that what he's saying is if you have somebody with a medium cognitive score and a low cognitive score, or somebody who has a serious offense from the discipline from being released from the military, but their father-in-law or future father-in-law, and you got somebody else who has a medium cognitive score or a high cognitive score and a honorable discharge from the military, they did their 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years or 20 years, whatever. Which one are you going to choose? And I think he's trying. And the sheriff is expecting us to believe that he's going to choose the other person. So I think a systematic review of their hiring practices will reveal whether that's true or not, and you have to compare apples with apples. But it's hard to believe, and he says it's given him confidence. Well, nobody is going to put anybody down as a reference. That's why I think sometimes references are just a joke. Are you going to put anybody down who's going to stab you in the back? I mean, is any? I'm sure that somebody's. I want to hear the person who's ever called somebody and said, "Yeah, you listen, no, I know he's my boy. I know he's my brother. I know he's my cousin. I know he's my coworker. I know he's my boy." Right? If you got to put voluntary references down, then that's one thing. But if you had to put down, I think that if you put down mandatory references, right? Your boss right now, your landlord right now, right? your previous military supervisor, commander. Put those people down. That's what we want to hear from your current boss, your former boss, your landlord. Put those people down. That's when you're going to get an accurate picture about what they look like, about what they may be like. That's what a reference section should be to me. What does your former boss think about you? What does your current boss think about you? What does your landlord think about you? What does your military supervisor, if you're in the military, your college professor, a college professor? Put those people down, right? Go through your record. Do you have any disciplinary stuff on there? And I teach at college right now, right? So you people out there plagiarizing stuff, that goes in your record. You're out there plagiarizing stuff, it goes in your record. Now you want to go for a police job or some other type of high profile job, and you got accusations of plagiarism on there. Think about that.
I wonder about somebody, and I'm not sure if they're a good applicant, but there is a connection. It may be something that I may be making another phone call, but it's not anything that gave him an advantage over somebody else. I'm looking for the best people. And if my best friend in the world sends me his nephew and that person is not capable of working here, then we're not going to hire him.
But you felt like Sean Grayson was capable of working in this department.
His background had everything that he needed. He had all the training he needed. He had references, and he was not. There was nothing in his background that would decertify him as a police officer. He had been certified 6.
That seems to be a common theme and statement with him. There's nothing that would decertify him. He just said he's looking for the best people. A person with low cognitive abilities, if you got a pool of candidates and he's got low cognitive abilities and somebody who's a severe disciplinary charge from the military, that's the best people? This interview was killing him. This interview was killing him.
Times in the state of Illinois, under their standards, even under the Safety Act, which expanded the number of decertifying convictions, to still work here in Illinois. So when you put all that together, I had confidence that he would be fine here.
Going into what you just talked about, there's been reforms when it comes to law enforcement hiring. You pointed this out in your statement again last night. You said standards for employment in law enforcement have evolved over time. You mentioned to expand the diversity in these sheriff's departments. Is that specifically applying to DUIs? Because I think when we talk about expanding diversity in law enforcement ranks, I don't know if they're specifically talking about,
Yo, this dude is wild. This dude is wild. This dude is wild. Oh my God. We want to get more diverse people, and we're going to open up to people with DUIs. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Listen, this is why this dude's a bureau chief, right? He's a Capitol bureau chief. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Sean Grayson in that specific, when you talk about his demographics, I guess. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're looking for applicants.
Now look how ready he is.
And we talk about the.
Oh my God! Look how ready he is. Oh my God! He's mad. He's mad. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Where are we at? I gotta do a comparison. Maybe he's been always this red. I don't know. Maybe I'm just seeing it now. Hold on. We're at 808. We're at 808. Let's go back here. What is this? 245. I just want to see. Maybe it's 245. He's the same level of red. 140. Maybe he's just mad the whole time. Maybe he's just maybe I'm just seeing things. That was a wild question though. 808. We're at 808.
Expansion, if it's in diversity as far as your employees, we're constantly looking for all walks of life. I think the Sheriff's Office should reflect the community, and we never stop trying that. But we can't force people to apply here. So we know that we received less applications because of maybe a narrative that people don't want to work in law enforcement anymore. That really doesn't make any sense to us because it's good pay, good benefits, but yet we're receiving a lot less applicants. So I'm not sure why that is.
But to go off of that narrative,
I don't know if this guy's doing a lot of. I don't know if he just keeps saying that, or he's not reading the source material. He's not reading these police chief magazines and stuff. They're telling. We know why. It's because of the Ferguson effect. We know why. I mean, this is well documented. I wrote about it in my dissertation. It's well documented. YouTube effect.
Talked about this narrative before.
Excuse me. YouTube effect. I'll rewind it a little bit. YouTube effect and the Ferguson effect. That's why people don't join law enforcement that much anymore.
We've talked about this narrative before. I've interviewed you before. We've had these discussions around why people don't want to work in law enforcement. Does an instance like this not hurt that trust in the institution itself and hurt a person's willingness to get into this field?
It may. I don't want to speculate too much, but when the facts of the case all come out, and some of the rumors that are flying out there that are simply not true, it should help alleviate some of that. But the fact is that we train people, and Sean Grayson had more than double the training most people get. He had been through a part-time academy, a transition academy to legally work full-time in Illinois, and then when I hired him, I sent him through a whole nother 16-week training academy. So training and experience is what get you through.
I hope that I don't know if the answer to this. Why did you send him through another 16 weeks? He had already been a police officer. You do a transition academy. He had done training with other departments. All you really need to catch up on is your policies and procedures, which should take 2, 3, 4 weeks. So why did you send him in for another 16 weeks? That's a big question. Did you recognize that may actually be a problem? Did you recognize that this guy was a problem? And so you sent him for more training?
And ensure that you're safe and the citizens are safe and you can do your job, you have to know the policies and procedures. He violated all that. He acted outside the scope of his authority as a police officer with our policies and procedures and the law. He failed. He individually failed. That is not a reflection of law enforcement or any potential candidate. These candidates know because most of them don't get into it naive. They talk to people, some of them do ride-alongs, some have done explorer programs, work part-time, and they're not naive going into it. So they know they will get the training. We have deputies, they handle thousands of calls in their career that have done it right. And this is what I'm worried about. They know they did it right. We had one individual that snapped for whatever reason, that's responsible and solely responsible for this, it's impossible to identify that. There was no reason why he shouldn't have done his job that night.
Sean Grayson, when he arrived at the scene, was wearing the Sangamon County Sheriff's deputy uniform. And when we talk about public trust in this office, you called it partisan politics earlier, but Mark Ayers in his statement said that he believes that the public trust in this department is decimated because of this. How do you expect people in this community, who aren't going to know the names, the personal backstories, everything about a deputy that responds to their call, how do you expect them to trust that uniform now, seeing what has happened with him in it?
Well, it's important that we build that trust. We build a bridge to the community. It's already started with the meeting Monday night. I've known many of these community leaders for decades. I was on the phone with them immediately within the days of this incident, and we talked about it. They understood the investigative process. They were appreciative of the phone call. Again, people that we have each other's personal cell phone numbers that we've talked to many times throughout my career, working with them and their groups, getting out to as much community outreach as we can. And then every day, our deputies are out, whether it's at the gas station or driving through the neighborhood and kids are playing basketball, that we assure them that we are not that person. That is an individual that broke the law. He is responsible for this. We are not him. And that is not what will define us. We will get through this. And for somebody to use this situation for political reason, I think is quite frankly an embarrassment.
But those community leaders are also the ones calling for your resignation. Some of the activist groups in the city are the ones calling for your resignation because they don't believe that the person who hired Sean Grayson is in the right position, is capable of building that trust back, just based on that act.
Well, that is their opinion, and they're entitled to that. I was elected by the people twice to run this agency, and that means good times and bad. And you have been through bad times with me right here, and we have suffered and we've come through it, and I am not going to abandon the agency. They need me now more than ever, and I daily get phone calls and text messages from my deputies saying, do not listen to that. We need you here, and that's what strengthens me. That they know that I'm the right guy for the job. I know I'm the right guy for the job, and quite frankly, a lot of the county knows I'm still the right guy for the job. They know this is one individual that acted outside the scope of his authority and our policies, procedures, and the law, and he is now locked up and charged with murder. He will pay the price for that. He and he alone is responsible.
So you don't believe that just the fact that he was given a badge and a gun from this department makes the department, the command staff, the people in the hiring staff, or the hiring board, yourself culpable in a way?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is on one individual that had all the training and tools and experience necessary to do this job. Up to that point, he had done the job. We didn't have any use of force complaints on him, not here nor any other agency he worked at. There was no indication of anything in his past that would have led to us understanding how he was going to snap that night. That is on him, and it cannot be predicted.
Do you believe that this shooting,
I would disagree with that statement. I think that racially motivated. Jeez, here we go. But it's got to come up, right? Mostly racially motivated. Of course, he's going to say no. And let me answer this question before. I lost my train of thought. So the question about the racially motivated, I do think that it's going to come down to seeing black people as fully human. That's well documented in all of the literature, from medical science to the educational sphere and to law enforcement. Right. To seeing black people as truly and fully human is an issue, and I think that a lot of that was going on.
That Grayson's actions were racially motivated.
There's no indication right now that these were racially motivated.
When you say no indication,
okay, so he said no indication. So I disagree with his previous statements about there was no indicator that he had the propensity to do this. Well, I think that there was when he had low cognitive skills or abilities. Number one, and then whatever happened in that military. I mean, you can't tell me that you had a pool of applicants. Well, I guess you can. I've looked at a number of these. And if he's the best of the best that is applying, that was bad. Just the military. He did something bad in the military. They're not going to tell us. And if you have other viable candidates, right? When you need to put butts in seats, that becomes a problem.
Is that just he never said any racial slurs at the case, or this was two white deputies responding to a black woman's house who was having.
Also, let me just say, and there's the whole lying on reports thing. I don't know why you would take anybody who was dishonest on a report. So these are some indicators. Continuing to racially motivated.
Mental health issues. There was an overreaction that has been made clear through the video and through all testimony we've seen about this case. You don't believe that the fact that her race played a factor in how Grayson felt going into that home?
There was, after reviewing the body-worn camera footage, there was nothing on that footage that would have revealed that. There's nothing here at the agency that we have currently. There was no complaints about racial issues, and nothing came from other agencies about racial issues. So as of right now, I have no indication that was a factor.
There have been calls for implicit bias training, more implicit bias training, not just at your department, but at departments across the state, across the country, as a result of this. Do you feel like that is necessary? Talking about, Sonya Massey's race and also her conditions, her mental health issues she had been having leading up to this.
We mandate that.
Do you think there needs to be more?
Well, training is ongoing, right? Training evolves, and there's different types of training, and there's certainly more mandates in the state now. And in addition to that, the deputies take elective courses where they want to learn more. So training never stops. If you have a 30-year career, you may be taking a training course the last week of your career, because that's just what we do. It's law updates, it's procedure updates, it's technology, you name it. We're always evolving to be better, and I think that it's important that we continue to look at different types of implicit bias training and cultural diversity training, and it's something that we mandate, and that the people have to do it here every year.
There is a commission that the city has with those community leaders, those activists, that helps with facilitate these kinds of conversations. You've said that you've had these conversations now, after the fact that this has happened, but now does the county need to get involved with that kind of proactive conversation regarding this? Does it need to form a citizens review commission for sheriff's deputies' actions in the field?
I'm looking to work anyway with the community and leaders as to how we can improve our processes here. I certainly had a relationship and been in many meetings with all the organizations that you're talking about.
All right, I don't want this. This is already 38 minutes in. I'm probably going to break this up a little bit. So he's going to give this typical answers. We're doing everything we need to be doing. But shout out to the guy here, to the interviewer here. I think he did a good job, in trying to dig into the situation here. So cultural competency, implicit bias, cultural sensitivity, all this type of training. People laugh at it, they roll their eyes and all this kind of stuff, but that makes a difference. And so again, when Miss Massey said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus, right? You gotta understand. It was important for the deputy to understand what she meant by that. And, I think there was just a really big mix-up. And the mix-up is that she was saying, it was something that a lot of times people who are heavily involved with the church and, yes, suffering from mental illness at the same time will say, because they don't like the way that certain people are acting or going or things along those lines. I still think that she meant, or at least the deputy thought that she meant she was going to sprinkle water, right? If you think about the Exorcist movie, in the name of the Father, Son, right? That sprinkling water. I think that's what he thought that she was going to do. So cultural competency. So I was talking to a friend of mine who's also a sheriff's deputy. We were discussing this case, and he reminded me of a situation that happened to me that I had told him about. So when I was brand new in the job, right? This officer, right? White dude. We're still friends today. I think I might have told the story. I'll tell it again though. And he comes up to me. He says, Lawrence, what would you think if somebody says somebody done fell out? So I'm like, I would have thought they passed out. He's like, well, I was standing around thinking they fell out of something. Fell out of what, right? It was a medical call that they were on. I think it was a paramedic at the time, and he became a police officer. So and I had to tell him, no, man. When somebody says they fell out because the emergency medical call that they were on was somebody passed out on the ground. Somebody's passed out on the ground. He arrives as the paramedics, and other people around him saying he just fell out. He done fell out. And so he didn't understand that the saying that they had passed out. So that's what cultural competency type of training comes in at, where you can have different people, different officers from different backgrounds, so they can interpret, translate, call it what you want, what people are meaning and what they are saying along the way. And I think that there was a lack of cultural competence on this officer, whether it's the department's fault or whether it's the individual officer's fault. And you can't train for every single saying. The sayings, listen, I'm a black guy, and I hear stuff. I'm like, I don't know what these people are saying, right? So hip hop and slang in these types of sayings are constantly evolving, and so it's very important to keep up with that. And if you don't have that type of repertoire with the neighborhood, with the community that you're policing in, that you're working in, then you won't understand what they're saying. So it was up to me to help them, my officers, understand. If you get to a medical call and somebody says somebody done fell out, it doesn't mean that they literally fell out of a building or fell out of a car or fell out of something. It means that they passed out. Now, I'm sure that there's a new slang term for it today, but that's where cultural competency comes in at. So here's how I would. And I'm going to end it off here with some of my recommendations for this department. I do think, I don't think that I think the sheriff gave some good answers here, given this situation, but overall, I would not be happy with it. I don't like how he threw the people under the bus and these community leaders, community activist leaders, and all this kind of stuff. So I still think that he should resign. because there are certainly, it seems to me, some problems within the community. All right, so we're going to finish off there. So I wanted to give some ideas about what I think it's going to take to fix this department. Assuming that there's, and I am assuming, I'm making the broad assumption that there are some things wrong with the department. The sheriff was kind of slippery, and I don't mean that. Well, he was giving some good answers, but I still think that there's some problems with the department. Things I've already pointed out. I'm not going to elaborate on those again. So I think that number one, we need to take a look at the second officer in his training. He also pulled his gun. Since George Floyd, I said it before, I'll say it again. Since George Floyd, there has been a duty to de-escalate amongst all law enforcement. That has become the standard. A duty to de-escalate and a duty to intervene. Almost all policies have been updated to reflect this. Even when you take a look at the Secret Service, their policy about they have a duty to intervene and a duty to de-escalate when appropriate. So you got to take a look at that second officer. I don't know how long they were on. They need more retraining or whatever. But he didn't de-escalate and he didn't intervene and say, "Whoa, wait a minute here. What's up with this? Right? You got a pot of water, man. Hold on. You're not gonna shoot somebody over a pot of water." I think they need a systemic review of body-worn cameras. You need to take a look at all these different officers' actions, reactions, how they talk to people, what they're saying off camera, and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's going to I would lump that into supervisory review. You need to know what your officers are saying about people and develop a culture of sensitivity towards people who are different, or who are going through mental health crisis, young children, elderly individuals, again, mental people, foreign nationals, undocumented workers, illegal immigrants, call them what you want, right? We need to understand how they are being othered. And the idea of being othered is when you call people out of their skin color, out of their name, and some pejorative to make them seem less human. That was a question that I would attribute to, was this racially motivated? I don't think he shot her because she was black, but I do think that there is an inherent idea, and I know that there's an inherent idea amongst people that African Americans and sometimes women should be treated lesser than. Sometimes people think that women should get a preference, but you need to take a look at that and make sure that you are addressing that properly as a police department, and that's part of implicit bias training. We all have them, but what are you doing to control them? If you look at people who are black, or if you look at people who are women, you look at people who are not naturalized citizens, or people who are taller, or people who are larger physically, more fluffy, more plump. How do we treat them? And that is something that needs to be addressed within implicit bias training. Add to that sensitivity training they need to go through. These are things I would do if I was in day one as chief, right? A supervisor review, also a policy review. What's going on with this, right? How are we looking at our policies, right? Do we have a policy that could have addressed this? Was our policy sufficient? I would run it by lawyers, other department heads. Is our policies sufficient? Do we need to make some changes? You can't plan for every single circumstance. I definitely get the chief on that. You can't plan for every situation, but you got to make sure that your policy, as much as possible, is airtight, as much as possible. I would talk to the dispatch too, right? Have a conversation with them. Make sure, what are their policies, right? Was there a notification? Obviously this will come out in the dashboard cams and dashboard cams. If they have laptops, the dispatch records. Did you tell this people that we were just there the other day and this lady's having mental illness the other night? Did you tell them that? I mean, that might have changed their whole approach, right? So you got to have a conversation with dispatch, right? Or at least part of the systemic review that I would do of this incident. Of course, as they mentioned up here, I would do a review of the hiring process. That hiring process, man, you got to figure that out, man. Whether you're not going to take anybody who's been jumping around from department to department, you got to take a look at, why they're jumping around, this whole military situation, other departments not sharing the full extent of information. That's crazy. And you work with these departments, these. I'm sure that there's a sheriff's deputies commission where they all talk to each other. I'm on the phone with the Logan Sheriff Department. Like, dude, what the heck, man? You didn't tell me all this? That's a problem. That's a problem. Review of evaluations. Make sure that they mean something, right? You know, it was another report that I read talked about. You know, he thought it was part of the review that I think it was another news article. I'm not going to show it here, but all the different complaints that they had, you know, him lying in reports and always trying to go after the drug arrests. I talked about that, right? The big game hunters, police officers, these types of calls are beneath them. They think they're beneath them. That's crazy, right? And this idea of false allegations and writing reports, how are you hiring police officers and they've been accused of lying? That's on paper. That's on. How can you as a police officer, how can you as a district attorney, as a defense attorney, as a judge, as a reporter, believe anything that this person has put in their report if they've once been accused of lying? That was one of the biggest things that was taught to me in the police academy. If you lie on a report, you're done. You're fired. And we fired. I know 2 people in my time in the police department. We fired for lying. So you got to suggest some changes to Illinois law concerning making sure that they're all in one accord about the hiring practices, the revealing of incidents. And I know there's all of this protection of the employee rights and all that kind of stuff, but here's what you get. Here's what you get, particularly with the law enforcement. And as I was on another panel and reading something, and it was a doctor who said, "Listen, you go for a doctor, you can Google their name, you can get, you know, how many times they've been sued and how many all this information about any type of doctor. When it comes to law enforcement, it's like pulling teeth." Here's another medical reference for you. So those are just some of the reviews that I would do, but you got to take a look at what happened here. He's got to do a review. The state should be doing review, just like they're doing with the President Trump thing. You got to do a systemic outside agency, come in here and take a look at what happened from the training of our individuals to our employment practices to our retraining practices to our transition from one department to a next department. Is that sufficient? To our dispatch methodologies, to our use of force training, our understanding of the escalation of the use of force, de-escalation tactics. All of this has got to be talked about, man. It's got to be talked about. And you got to have another agency come in here and take a look at you and rip you apart and say, this is where you failed at. Here's what your supervisors should be doing. Here's the country or state and county standard. Here's what you guys are doing, right? You know, other departments are getting are getting reviews about stuff, and just like you were pressing other county sheriffs, you got to press the military, and the military should ease up on that, right? I mean, this isn't people trying to get a job, you know, working in a recycling plant. No shade to them, but this is an important job, and if you got things in your record, you got to tell people. You got to tell people. Shame on the military for allowing that. Shame on them. They bear some burden in this as well. Because maybe if they would have told them what the severe charge was, they wouldn't have done it. I mean, a severe charge is punching your supervisor. Maybe you take them. You know, maybe you do it. If it's sexual assault or you know, you got to take a look at that. But this guy had some stuff in his past. He definitely had some stuff, from the 2 DWIs to lying on his report to failure to monitor, to obey a supervisor's command to break off a pursuit, to all of that, man. It's bad, man. That was bad. This was bad. So this is long enough. Let me know your thoughts and your opinions. Hit me up in the comment section. Keep the conversation going. And answer this question. Do you think this guy's going to get convicted? Do you think he's going to get convicted? Much love and peace.